Alright, you bastards, this is Some-Belgian-prepper, and today's video is going to be very controversial and very difficult for some people, but it's something that, as a prepper, as a survivalist, it's one of those possibilities that we need to take into account, and that is, before I start talking about this very controversial subject, if you're interested in detective stories, there will be a link to my book in the description to my book called Bloody Crosses. It's in Dutch, so if you're interested, take a look. So, the topic that I wanted to talk about was suicide. And I'm talking in the sense of suicide as an option. Because if you really think about it, even in these days, with all the therapy, all the medicine against clinical depression and all that stuff, and especially in the West where the living standard is higher than anywhere else in the world, there is no gang cartels like in ruling the streets like in some countries. There is no dictatorship that is sending death squads. There is no famine. Uh, so yeah, you would think that people in the West would be happy, but actually the suicide rates are very high in the West, and that made me think that during a disaster, and I mean about SHTF disaster scenario or war or something like that, World War III, then how many people would commit suicide then? And by the way, I just want to mention, I'm going to say the word suicide, whatever YouTube says, because unaliving or deleting yourself is such a stupid term. We all know what we're talking about, so stop with this kind of happy talk for some YouTube money. Alright, I need to get that off my chest. So, suicide. Why would people commit suicide during a disaster scenario? Actually, there are several cases in history where we can look back at and see why people would do that. Examples are to escape torture. If you see some of these videos about cartel members or hostages being sliced and diced, so to say, or tortured in any other way, yeah. If you know that is the fate that awaits you as a soldier captured in battle, like we saw in the Ukraine, where some poor soldier that was captured got castrated with just one of those office knives, uh, and some other videos that were very horrible to watch. But yeah, like I said, if you know that is the fate that awaits you, like we see in third world countries where there are genocides, and you know what they do to when they capture a village and what they do to perhaps the men or the women. If that's the fate that awaits you, that you know that you will be tortured, then in such scenarios, perhaps it's understandable why you would prevent from following that fate. The same thing goes for in the, I think it's called Masada in Jerusalem during the Roman occupation, when the Romans besieged the fortress Masada, where the Jewish rebels were, and when they captured it, they discovered that most of the Jewish rebels over there committed suicide to prevent, because they knew that the Romans would have a slow, agonizing death by crucifixion or something that await them, so they didn't want to follow that fate. Same thing goes for US cavalrymen during the Indian Wars, uh, right around the Civil Wars, and there they always kept one bullet to themselves because they knew that uh, Indians would torture their victims for days if they were captured. They didn't have a concept of surrender, so that was the fate that waited them, and they kept always a bullet for them. What is other things? Another type of suicide is altruistic suicide, and that is where people sacrifice themselves to be not a burden upon their fellow men. And this is something that you see during famines or something like that, where an extra mouth could be the death of your children or the weak your partner or females. The persons you would sacrifice yourself and that's something that happened during several times, like the Russian Civil War, for example, in China during the Great Leap Forwards. It's been noticed a few times, and yeah, just also the pride of people. But that's another thing that's a totally other thing that's unrelated. What is another thing that people do it for? Uh, to prevent debt or to get insurance money from their life insurance in some way, so their family lives on when they're getting into a financial crisis. Like I said, that's also a form of altruistic suicide, to be not a burden and to help survive the people that you love the most. Yeah, those are a few examples. Or when you're in a shitty defense situation where you're so wounded that you cannot walk, you know you're infected, you have something like gangrene that is too far for amputation or somewhere else, or you're deadly wounded, like during the world wars and even all the wars before. If you had a wound to the stomach, then you were a goner. Then they either left you to die on your own, or some people took it upon themselves to uh, to not suffer a prolonged painful death. Another thing that I once saw in a biography was some British soldiers who were in the Pacific, and if you know the plant Gimpy Gimpy, it's one of the most painful plants in the world. If you get even a brush of that plant, it got neurotoxins that will give you the worst pains ever for even years, with or without painkillers. And one of the soldiers used those leaves as toilet paper. And yeah, and the biography says that he committed suicide short after he was exposed to the Gimpy Gimpy. Then it was known that the pain would be for years. So yeah, so he shot himself to get out of the pain. And these are moments can that in my eyes I can understand why people would commit suicide. But for I would say, because I have dealt with in my years, I have dealt with some people that were depressed, in a depressive and in a heavy depression, or they were suicidal, or they were about to commit suicide. And yeah, like I said, in the West, I would say, whatever your situation is, leave your pride, leave your dark thoughts, and anything is better than than committing suicide, is in my opinion. If you are not in the most horrible pain ever, if you're not what is the word for people that are certain to die about from a disease or like cancer, um, people who are, yeah, you know what I mean, people who are far beyond saving when they have a condition like cancer or some other disease, and they are definitely going to die. Or yeah, those things I can understand. Oh, but in any other situation, I would say keep on going, push through, bite on your teeth, and seek uh, seek help with the people you love, you trust. Talk with them, because that's a problem with a lot of people who are in this kind of mindset uh, or depression. They don't talk to people, and suddenly they will snap and do something radical. So always keep talking, and yeah, that will also not only as a diversion, but also to try to help to find what the problem is, to help the problem, and perhaps the situation will change. So that's more than I can say about it. But I would say there are several things that if you're going to commit suicide, and I'm not saying that is uh, a guidance on how to do it. If you're in the West, like I said, and you're depressed, no, seek help, seek professional help, seek help with friends. But that is more for like the examples that I gave when you're want to escape a phase of torture, uh, or when you're deadly wounded in a situation on an expedition or shit hit the fan, and you know that you will not survive in a few days, and you want to shorten it. There are several things that you can do and you should not do. one of the most thing the one way that would be most available in any situation is slicing the wrist. But like I said, that is not the guidance. But if you're going to slice, don't slice horizontally because it will close off, the arteries will close off, and slide vertically so the whole vein is open and there is too much open that it will not be able to close again. And put your hands in water because that will also prevent from the wounds closing off. Um, Another thing that, of course, shot to the head, always effective, but you have to be very carefully where to aim because I've seen a lot of videos where people who shot them in their head were still alive because they missed vital parts of the brain. You would be amazed at how many damage a human brain can endure. There are people who survived accidents, gunshots, who missing 3/4 of their heads. I even had a teacher once who had some accident and this side of his head was almost totally empty uh, because there was a part of the skull missing and you saw uh, a hole of this big inside of it. So if you're going to do it, I would say put it in your mouth and aim up so you hit the center of the brain, which is the thing. When that is gone, the so-called reptile brain, when that is gone, you're gone. There is no other part that is just that you will wobbling around. There is even one case where a guy was caught, was because the parents of some girl during Christmas, they thought there was something going on, that they have not seen their daughter for Christmas, so they called the cops. The cops sent people over there, and they found that the girl was shot to death, and they saw some guy, the boyfriend I think it was, just wobbling around, screaming nonsense, and they thought he did it, so they took him to the police station to interrogate him, but after a long time of rambling random words, one of the cops noticed something, and that was he was at a little bit of blood inside of his nose, and they thought it was from a self-defense action when he tried to kill his girlfriend. But what happens was the place got robbed by some persons that night, and they shot from beneath right up the nose, and it went into the brain, and even then it missed the vital parts, and that person had walked around for 3 days with a bullet in his head and was still alive walking around. But yeah, like I said, he was just not making any sense, but he was still alive and felt everything. So yeah, that is one of those examples again. I would say another thing is choking. I would not say, because you hear always about these people in prison who commit suicide, or they have been made uh, doing suicide in an attempt to kill them and cover it up. But the thing is, it takes a long time, and you hear a lot of these stories where people who hang themselves always have fiber beneath their nails, because in the last moment of instinct of survival, they started to grasp at their necks and try to loosen it up in the last moments before they choked to death. And sometimes, if you hear about botched executions, it could take to a few minutes to even half an hour, where somebody who was hanged still was grasping for air. So hanging is not always the best option. So I would say putting a plastic bag over your head uh, to get monoxide poisoning about yourself and suffocate yourself that way is perhaps more effective than hanging, I would say. Yeah, I know it's kind of grim, but these are things that you need to think about if your time and resources are out of reach in a desperate situation where you want to escape, like I said, torture or a slow, painful death. Um, I heard about people who were captured who bled to death because they bit their tongue off, but you have to be very determined to do that, and you have to do it when your captors are not noticing it, so they cannot prop something like a handkerchief into your mouth. So yeah, that's something that you also need to, that is likely improbable. Poison is always a bad idea because your body is made to exhume poison by with your gallbladder and vomiting to get an alcohol poisoning to get the poisons out. So that is something that happened with a lot of people who commit suicide with poisoning or medicine overdose. They just vomit it out, and they yeah have they often have some sort of brain damage or some other long-term physical ailment after that. But yeah, like I said, there is a high chance that it will fail also. So that's also not a good thing. Another thing that is so-called suicide by cop, but you can put it into other things in this kind of last attempts in a disaster scenario, is like running towards the guy with the gun, so to say. So yeah, like I said, with the cartels, try to defend yourself so they or attack them so they will have to shoot you, that they will not have a choice, instead of going through the brutal torture. Uh, or going, if you're in a camp like during World War II, there were Jews who commit suicide by stepping over the line. The line was a certain line before the fence, where if you crossed it, you were shot by the guards because it would be considered an escape attempt, and that's also a way to do a sort of suicide by cop, so to say. And of course, you can do like in Japan, ask a friend to help you with seppuku, but skip the part where you slice yourself open. But ask them do it for me because I cannot do it. And yeah, it's very hard to ask for something of a person and to actually do it to a person. Yeah, these were some ways to do it, but yeah, like I said, this is not an instructional video on for people who are depressed. It is just hypothetical in an extreme scenario for survival. Yeah, not survival, but yeah, you know what I mean. Um, like I said, always seek help from friends or professional help before you're doing something to yourself. So there was another point that I wanted to make, but I seem to have forgotten about it. Oh well. So I know this was a grim and controversial video, but yeah, as a prepper and survivalist, you need to think about every scenario that is possible. And there is something else. The point that I wanted to make is, so a lot of people will say, "I would never do that. I would be able to withstand the torture. I would be able to find a way out of it." But if you look into history, millions of people didn't make it in that way. Millions of people died by the hands of brutal torturers, executioners, famines, mortal wounds during expeditions, or ways in scenarios where they try to save a loved one, their children, their a wife, or their people of their community. And yeah, that's, if you don't have the imagination, that if you think that you are the absolute hero of the story, that you will always find a way out, that's not realistic. All the people in the past, all the people you see in those cartel movies, all the people you read about into history or biographies that died, yeah, they also thought they were the main character and the hero of the story, and everything will have a happy ending. But it's not always that, and it's that we need to accept as a prepper and survivalist, that the, some things can go so bad that it cannot be restored. And yeah, I know these are some dark thoughts, and it's not the beer talking, it's just something that came to mind, and I thought, why the hell not to make a video about this. So let me know what you think about it, and like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and see if you get any other ideas about the subject. I'm always eager to learn to know about new thoughts or possibilities or things that I have not mentioned or thought about. So let me know in the comments, and see you in the next video. Cheers!